Oh, just kidding. Whoa, welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. The flu is done. Get effed flu. Get out of here. Back. I meant to do a show Friday, but as you might have seen on social media, I pretty much was waiting for death to just knock down the door. Last thing, it was bad. The flu is not fun this year. 0 out of 0. Do not recommend. Don't get the flu. Don't have your kids bring the flu home. Don't let your 2-year-old get the flu. It has been an absolutely brutal week and a half, 2 weeks of illness in this house. But I said, going into the NFC Championship game or coming out of it, I said, the Joy family essentially took the bad, right? We sacrificed our own health so the Eagles could win the NFC Championship. And if all goes well, we have once again overextended our own health as a family. We're trying to help the Eagles win the Super Bowl this week. But welcome in, because I have to tell you, I was a little bit sad on Friday. I fell asleep early Thursday. I couldn't make Press Row Show because Thursday I could not get out of bed. I felt horrible. And so, of course, Thursday is when the Flyers go out and make a trade, which we're going to get into in a second. And I was like, but it looked like the trade didn't actually fully happen while the game was going on. And then later into the night, got the message. So I woke up with the first of 3 or 5 nights or something with cold sweats. And I look at my phone, I have 2 texts, and they're like, when you wake up, Flyers made a trade. I'm like, what? Okay. But then I realized, all right, well, maybe I'll be feeling better by Friday morning. I could do my show. Friday, I couldn't get out of bed. I think I got out of bed twice. One time was to come all the way down here to write a post. And then I was like, all right, I still have more to do. So I took my laptop to bed. Felt absolutely horrible. This is the worst sickness that I have had since I think the early days of COVID or something. This is bad. Really, I still don't feel good, but I feel good enough to talk into a microphone. It won't be a very long show today because I don't know how long my voice will last. I don't know how long my body's going to last. I'm pretty sure that throwing everything I have into this is going to probably cost me later today because I'll probably, practically fall asleep with my head on the desk. But I can't because I have a day job, but I'm going to get there too. I've already started doing the day job stuff, so we just kind of shuffled things around a little bit today. Did a little bit of the day job stuff earlier. It's fine. But I want to welcome all of you in because we are in the midst of the Eagles going to the Super Bowl, arriving in New Orleans, where they're going to meet the Chiefs, and I feel even more confident. I feel even better today, not just because I looked at the flu and I gave it the one-finger salute. No. I feel better about this game because I've just looked at the historical context of how I felt going into Super Bowls in the past. And man, I feel really good about this one. And now I'm looking in the camera and I'm seeing that these strings are very, very disproportionate. Oh, that made it worse. There we go. Now you can't. Yeah, there we go. Now there's just one. That's going to drive me nuts. Anyway, we have a lot to get into. Flyers trade, Eagles going off to the Super Bowl. Oh, and Luka Doncic. I told you guys at the beginning of this show, when this whole thing started, a lot of Philly sports, but I'm going to weigh in on national sports too. What we saw in the NBA this weekend, we saw 2 big trades. One that came out of absolutely nowhere, the Luka Doncic trade, which was an absolute disaster class in front office management. We're going to get there. And then another big one went down last night with De'Aaron Fox going from Sacramento to San Antonio, all of a sudden making the Spurs probably top 3 league pass team to check out. Victor Wembanyama has a legitimate point guard in De'Aaron Fox. They kept most of their pieces, most of the supporting cast in place. That Spurs team is going to be a lot of fun. And as many of you know, I'm a big basketball fan, so I'll happily sit down and watch some San Antonio Spurs basketball now. But I digress. I'm going to go out to the comments here real quick, and then I'm going to let you know how I'm feeling about the Flyers, who made a trade and perhaps just gave you a better indication of where their strategery is going into this offseason, maybe even to the trade deadline. JH with a hi, Russ. Landros, too, asking, is it 8:30 already? I will point out that it is 8:30 Mountain Time right now, so, 8:49 Mountain Time, but it's close enough. Josh White says, oh, yes. Zacho, oh, yes. Thoughts on Frostbee trade? Flyers finally leaning into the rebuild. Things will get interesting now. We are going to get there. Nico with a fly, Eagles fly. Landros, who says birds in New Orleans. I will arrive Friday afternoon. Can't wait. Stoked. Landros, you going to the Super Bowl? Landros! Oh, we need an inside report. Our Landros on the inside. Jamie says, hope all the sickness is out of your house, Russ. All the kids are good. They're all better. My wife somehow has avoided it. God bless her. I'm mostly on the mend. If I'm still feeling crappy in a few days, I'm going to be very upset because it's been long now. I'm not happy about it. JH says, hopefully all those trades will shut Flyers Twitter up about,
but he doesn't do any trades and isn't making any progress to the rebuild.
Could definitely argue whether the trade was the right move, I guess. All right. I agree. Zacho says, also glad to feel much better. Thank you. Flu ran through the house last week. Ugh. Zach, I hope you're doing better. This is brutal. Everybody I know who's had the flu so far has said this is the worst flu. Pediatrician, by the way, because those of you who have kids, Joe says good morning. If you are a parent out there and your kids have not gotten the flu yet, I will just warn you. They say it's like flu's usually like 3, maybe 4 days. This is like 5, 6, maybe even 7, and the fevers last even longer. It's horrible. Horrible. Who's making the flu stronger? What are we doing? Oh, it doesn't matter. Anthony DeGrazio says, Russ, feeling just as good as the Flyers start their official version of tanking. Coincidence? Maybe. But maybe not. 610 MRA says, we have absolutely no problem with a short show. Shorter the better here. 610 is here and is trolling me on my own show? But thank you, I guess. JH has Flyers shut out in every game since the season ticket price went up. Coincidence? I think not. The players. They're part of a grand conspiracy to stand up for season ticket holders. Amadeo says, lower the ceiling, lower the floor. Oh, I should have made a shirt. Maybe I still will. But the Flyers are lowering the ceiling and lowering the floor. So we're going to get there. I see some other stuff about the Eagles, so we will get there. Connor Buss asks about the McGlynn transfer. I'll try to get there as well. If I don't, I'll get there on Wednesday. The Union traded a player that they've probably put as much or more resourcing into than just about anybody else from their academy system, and they've now dealt him within MLS. And they have a 50% sell-on fee for McGlynn. I mean, here, I'll just do this really quick because I'm not doing a whole thing on this. I might get to this later in the week, just about like the entire direction of where the Union are heading. McGlynn doesn't fit what Ernst Tanner wants to do. He just doesn't fit the system. He was arguably one of their best players and is arguably like one of the guys that they could have built around long-term, but he has aspirations of Europe. European teams have apparently reached out with interest in him. The 50% buy or sell-on clause is going to be really important if he ends up getting transferred from MLS to Europe. The Union will get 50% of that transfer fee. It could be a nice lucrative bounty. Hard to say. If they thought that McGlynn's skill set didn't fit what they were trying to run this year, then they might have thought that perhaps trading him to a system that does better fit his skill set could make him more valuable long-term. There are legitimate questions and comments and concerns about it because the Union are a poverty franchise who continue to boost up this academy system, which might even be the best in the entirety of MLS. The downside is they don't invest at all in their first team or invest in a real meaningful way. So make of it what you will. I'm not here to give the Union money as a spectator to watch them then go and just keep churning out players at the academy level and then do nothing with them when they get to MLS, or to churn out these academy players and then immediately send them off to Europe. I don't get pride in saying,
oh, well, Sullivan goes to Europe and he's going to be really good. Oh, McGlynn, 2 years from now, he goes to Europe, he's going to look really great. And it really gives credit to that great Union farm system.
I don't care. I really don't care. I'd actually just prefer the Union to invest in the first team. That would be fine. I would love it. Thank you. So that's where I'm at right now with the Union. Again, we might get back there later this week. I'm not sure. But by all means, if you're a Union fan, anytime you want to check in about the Union, you can. And I will, I'm sure, have something to say about the Sons of Ben at some point. But, Connor Buss says, the only issue with the transfer is the money goes to Sugarman, not to be reinvested at all. I had the same sentiments as you regarding transfer. Great player won't fit the system. Yeah, I don't know. The transfer funds, in theory, yeah, they go to Sugarman. Will he use them on the team? Prob's not. Okay. Let me get you into the Flyers trade. Because I know that there are people who cared for some reason about the two guys coming back, and I don't. I really don't. One is an underachieving first rounder. Cool. Kuzmenko is maybe a little bit interesting, and there were people reading between the lines on Kuzmenko and him having to waive his no movement clause, and that apparently, allegedly, reportedly, he had been reached out to by either Briere Jones, a combination of the two, somebody from within the Flyers, and he was convinced to waive that clause because he was told that it would be worth it and they need him. And people tried to read between the lines and say, oh, does that mean that Kuzmenko's here to be the Mishkov whisperer because they had both played together in the past? Is it because Kuzmenko had previously played with Elias Pettersson and that maybe Danny Briere's about to go, big fish hunting or whatever, big game hunting, and go out and make a deal for Elias Pettersson? The other guy from Vancouver that had been rumored to be on the trade block, potentially JT Miller, has since been traded to the Rangers. Will that now stop Vancouver from exploring the market for a Pettersson suitor? I don't know. Has Pettersson really worn out his welcome in Vancouver? I don't know. Do I think the Flyers will have interest? I think most teams would. I did check in on the Press Row show on Thursday night. I listened to Ant and to Bill Meltzer pretty much say they don't believe that Pettersson could be a number 1C on a Stanley Cup contending team. I'd argue that he is significantly better than anybody they have, and that even at a $12 million cap hit, he still is probably going to be worth that money because, oh, by the way, the cap is going to now go up for 3 straight years. And I know that some people don't like the cap argument, but if you look at cap percentage, that $12 million cap hit, it's still going to hurt, and it's still going to be one of the biggest ones on your cap for the next few years. But eventually, $12 million could potentially look like a bargain if he gets back to 95, 100-point pace Elias Pettersson. Now, is that still the guy who ultimately leads you to a Stanley Cup final and wins it? I don't know. But I would certainly like that Flyers team better. I'd certainly like them with an actual 1C. This, to me, isn't like trying to sell the fan base on Kevin Hayes. Right, because if you go back to it, I used to say Kevin Hayes was like a 2.5C, maybe a 3C. But they brought Kevin Hayes in part because they didn't know what they could get from Nolan Patrick. They didn't know if Nolan Patrick was ready, so they were like, oh, he could be, like a 1.5C. He could sometimes be your top line center and sometimes be a 2C. And we're like, no, that doesn't work. Kevin Hayes is like a third line center. I look at Pettersson and I say, at worst, he's the best 2C in the league. Is like where he should be. And I'd say that in most cases, he's probably a 1C. Now, will the Flyers actually go and execute a trade, or will they wait until the offseason to get in on the action? I don't know. I think that there's a case to be made here that you're smarter if you're the Flyers to wait until the offseason for a Pettersson move, and that maybe the cost comes down. But it's hard to say. Here's the one thing that you do have if you're the Flyers. You have cap space. Because Kuzmenko coming back, he's a UFA at the end of the year. You had Morgan Frost coming up as a restricted free agent. You had Joel Farabee with multiple years left at a $5 million cap hit. If you were to just simply extend Morgan Frost the same rate, you are now saving, going on into the future for the next few years, $7.5 million at the very least on your cap. If you just carry this year's cap hits forward, $7.5 million now just gone off the cap. $7.5 million. You know that you have dead money and you have retained money coming off the cap. Flyers, I think, are going to have about $30 million in cap space as currently constituted right now going into this offseason. And the question has come up time and time again. Did Matvei Mishkov coming over early change the team's plan? Now, I've been critical, okay? I have been critical because I don't think the Flyers have been perfectly clear about what it is they're trying to do. I think there's been mixed messaging. Here I am criticizing clarity, and I can't even get mixed messaging out. But I think that the Flyers, for better or worse, have kind of been their own worst enemy on the messaging of whether this is a rebuild, a retool, something. because you'll get Tortorella. And Tortorella, to his credit, in the last couple of days, said rebuild. Danny doesn't really say rebuild. Jonesy doesn't really say rebuild. They kind of imply that this is certainly more of an involved process. But if you're like, rebuild heavy, I don't know. Do you then make it a point that every time you have a press conference, you say rebuild? I don't know. I'm not going to hold Danny Briere's feet to the fire for not explicitly saying rebuild at his last press conference or at the mid-season press conference. But like, I think that they've probably done themselves a little bit of a disservice because I don't think the messaging has been entirely clear. And the reason that I say it's been unclear is because the fan base as a whole doesn't seem to have an idea, or at least prior to this trade, didn't seem to have a clear idea of where this team was headed. And we know that because in the comments section of this show, the comments section of Snow the Goalie, we get this very, I don't want to say it's like a bipolar thing because it's not, but you get this like diametric difference between the people who think, oh, they're definitely rebuilding, the people who think, oh, they're definitely afraid to tear it down, and they're just going to try to like patch it. So you can't have those two groups of people existing if you've been totally clear. That's not how this works. All right? Now, I think that after this trade of Frost and Farabee, one thing has become abundantly clear. The goal isn't to win this year. Now, I don't think they've ever given you the indication that the goal is to win. I criticized, and I will once again say fairly, I fairly criticized the notion, the public comments around saying the players will decide. Because whether or not GMs have to say shit. Coaches have to say shit. Players have to say shit. How much of it they believe, I don't know. And I brought this up 2 weeks ago on So the Goalie. And I asked Bundy, because Bundy's a former player. Like, does a guy who knows that he's on a team that isn't going to win a cup, does he really tell himself that, like, oh yeah, we can win the cup? He's like, yeah, they kind of do. And I said, well, that's delusional. And I guess you kind of have to be delusional if you're a pro player, because there aren't that many openings, and you have to tell yourself you're good enough to make it. But like, I live in reality. I live detached. All right? Like, I'm on a show that's partnered with the team, but like, I'm not state propaganda. You can't buy me. You can't buy my blind allegiance. I'm going to call things out when I see them, and when I think something is wrong, I'm going to say it. Sometimes that upsets people. Sometimes it upsets fans. Sometimes it upsets the Flyers. But you know what? I don't have to do this. I do this because I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy doing it because I like to be able to tell you people exactly what it is I think is happening and what I'd like to see and what I think a winner will look like. And so I am critical when I think it is warranted. And in the case of this move, oh, this is good. This is really good. Now, Morgan Frost scored a goal over the weekend, and there are already people panicking.
Oh no, Morgan Frost has gone to Calgary. Is Morgan Frost going to become that 1C that some of us always thought he could? Is Morgan Frost going to become the number 1C we all thought he would be?
No, probably not. Now, is Morgan Frost going to prove to be a perfectly fine player in Calgary? Yeah. Will he probably earn himself a nice contract? I would think so. Is Joel Farabee going to be worth $5 million? Well, with the increased cap in a year or two, $5 million is going to look like a bargain deal for probably like not quite a fourth liner, but $5 million is not going to be a bad cap hit. And if he can go back to being like a 20-ish goal scorer, 30 goal, high side potential, yeah, it's a good deal for Calgary. But for the Flyers, it really is a salary dump. You could kind of be sold on the idea, like, will Kuzmenko help to pull something out of Mishkov? Maybe. Well, the other guy, I'm honestly just calling him the other guy because I'm not a believer right now, and I don't think that the point of the trade was either of the actual roster players. But like, to me, if it's a salary dump, great. But you know what else it does? Repeat after me. It lowers the ceiling, lowers the floor. All I have wanted, all I have advocated for 18 months, lower the ceiling, lower the floor. Take the best possible scenario and the worst possible scenario, lower them both. Take them like the grapes under the feet, of the old Italian grandmothers in Tuscany as they're crushing the grapes and making the wine. Lower the ceiling, lower the floor. And they finally are doing it. Now, I have good news. Because if you're a Frost and a Farabee fan, I don't blame you. Seem like nice guys. We had Farabee on Snow the Goalie a few times. I don't think we ever had Frost on. But by all accounts, Frost, really good dude, very open, was a good interview, was very open to other members of the media. Those guys are going to have some success. How successful they'll be, I don't know. It's no longer my job to care. What I do care about is the fact that the Flyers are making it very clear that the playoff hopes that some people have been holding on to, very unlikely to happen. This is where I get angry, okay? And I'm going to try not to yell, because the last time I raised my voice, some of you saw, started hacking up a lung. There are two things that I fundamentally get pissed off about when I express how I feel about how you get better in the National Hockey League and how the Flyers need to get better. And it's not hard, okay? One, you cannot do an NBA process. You can't do a Sixers process. I've been clear about this for years. And yet, there are people who go,
Oh, Russ just wants Danny Briere to be Sam Hinkie.
it doesn't work. You can't do it. But what you can do is you can make the team worse by removing good players and preventing the team from getting a ton of wins. I get yelled at on Snow the Goalie. Bundy yelled at me last week. Russ, you can't tell players to go out and suck. Nobody's telling the players to go out and suck. Nobody's going out and telling John Tortorella to lose. But guess what? If your team doesn't have the talent to go out and win on a nightly basis, you're not going to win. And if you don't win, you're probably going to get a better pick. And now the Flyers are doing something that everybody should be able to get behind. They're clearing cap, and they're putting themselves in position for a better pick. Okay? So let's kind of go back, recalibrate, look at the entirety of Briere's time as the GM. He has now successfully offloaded Provorov, Hayes. In theory, had offloaded Sanheim. Torrey Krug said nay with the waiving of the no movement clause, but effectively had also tried to get rid of Sanheim. Sanheim is a good player, so maybe it ends up working out. He's now cleared Frost and Farabee. They're all, in their own ways, they're all good, or at the very least, NHL quality players. But you've now cleared that cap. And when the offseason rolls around, the Flyers are a much more dangerous team. Because whether they want to go after an unrestricted free agent, whether they decide to break the old boys club and actually offer sheet players, they can offer sheet players now because they'll have the cap flexibility to do so. And by the way, they're going to have an exponentially higher pick than they would have if they had kept Frost and Farabee. Now, one injury that happened last night, Rasmus Ristolainen goes out in the second period. People start going,
Oh boy, is Risto traded too? We got another first-round pick.
No, he was apparently hurt. Now, I will point out that last year, Risto had a lot of interest. And around the time that Risto was garnering the most interest, he got hurt. And so I said earlier this season, man, if he comes back and he plays well, you have to at least consider making a deal, because the last thing you can afford is to mentally decide, yeah, we're actually okay with trading Risto. Then he gets hurt. Now, I don't know what the injury is. I don't know how long the injury is going to be. It might have just been a one-night thing. Maybe it'll be 2 months. Who knows? One thing that you do know is that Risto has played the best hockey of his career this year. And the Flyers are probably still torn internally on whether or not to trade him. If they can get a first for him, they should absolutely explore it. Now, I would make the argument that at this point, the Flyers have enough picks in this draft. I'd look at trying to get a pick for 2026. Because right now you have 3 firsts and 4 seconds now because of this trade of Frost and Farabee. I'd be looking to try to punt some of that draft capital to 2026. That's just me. So Risto might be on the block. Scott Lawton, nobody knows. Nobody has any idea. Will Scott Lawton remain a Flyer? Entirely possible. And I saw, where's it at? There was somebody over here. Landros said hopefully Danny Briere has some more to lower both ceiling and the floor. Don't stop there. I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all. They have a few other guys on this team who are going to be attractive. Paling, in theory, could be attractive to a playoff team. Hathaway could be attractive to a playoff team. Like, they have additional pieces. If they really want to bottom out here, they could. Now, whether or not they do bottom out is a totally different thing. I will give, and this is going to shock some people, I'm going to give Torts a lot of credit here. Because I mentioned earlier, Torts is the only one who seemingly consistently says rebuild. Like, Torts is in a really weird position right now. Because if they were to offload a Risto, a Lawton, Paling, Hathaway, whatever combo of those guys, it sends a very clear message. I mean, I think right now, if you're in that locker room, if you were somehow delusional enough to be like, oh yeah, maybe they will add at the deadline, you know it's probably over now. The hope of making the playoffs this year, if you're a player, has probably been extinguished. Now, again, I get it. Players are delusional. They probably think they're going to win the cup. But like as things stand right now, the Flyers are in a much better position if you look at the draft lottery. And again, like if they remove a few more of these pieces, Torts is going to have a hell of a job on his hands because you're going to have to somehow instill this winning culture that you have made the ultimate priority as an organization. Torts' culture. Culture's Torts. They're simpatico. So if that is the case, Torts is going to have to figure out a way to keep the team together, galvanize the team, not have them tune him out, not have Mishkov turn on him, and oh, by the way, like try to remain positive in the midst of losing because they've now lost 3 straight games by a combined score of 10-0. And they've removed 2 of their best scoring options. I mean, Frost had probably some of the best vision on the team. Farabee, despite inconsistencies, still probably one of their best overall goal scoring options. So with those guys gone, now everybody knows where I feel about Torts, right? Like Torts, not the right guy. But if culture really is your thing, if culture is your number one thing, and you have been very much on Culture Island this entire time with your flag very firmly planted in the soil, then this is the best time for Torts to be the coach of the team. Because, like, let's just say you fire Torts, which they're not going to. Say they moved on from Torts. Whoever goes in there for the rest of the season is set up to fail. Like, if you look at this and you say, we're going to encourage Torts to step aside or to take an advisory role. We're going to put Brad Shaw in as head coach. Brad Shaw is being set up to fail with like 30-ish games left. One, I don't think Torts would do that. Like, I don't think that there's a scenario where the Flyers fire him. I don't think that there's a scenario where Torts walks away from the bench and sets up his lead assistant to fail. But like, you'd be putting so much of an onus on a guy to keep that locker room together in the midst of these trades that are going to, potentially cause some issues. Now, I think it was Sanheim. Sanheim went on the record as saying that, a bunch of the guys got together and had some drinks and had some dinner before Frost and Farabee left. And, Torts said that it was a really close locker room, but they're pros. Listen, on a human level, you feel bad for some of these Flyers players, right? They've grown up playing with Frost and Farabee. They've been mainstays with this organization to some extent. But like, for better or worse, the facts don't care about your feelings, and the facts are this team isn't good enough. Team's not really good enough to make the playoffs. Team's certainly not good enough to contend for a Stanley Cup. And ultimately, as an organization, your goal is to win a cup. So your feelings might be hurt, but the long-term viability of this team as a cup contender has gotten significantly better by making this one trade. Now, I will advocate they should continue making more. Whether they do or not remains to be seen. If the only thing that they can get right now, like let's say Risto's healthy, or he bounces back soon. If all you can get for Risto is like the 26th pick in this draft, I don't know if I do that. I might actually wait until the offseason and try to get a 2026 pick. Because again, I'm starting to wonder whether or not you're going to be able to do exactly what you want in this draft by getting even more capital. Like the Edmonton and the Colorado picks, are they going to be able to help you move up higher into like a second pick? Like if the Flyers were to draft, let's say 5th overall or 6th overall, are those two later picks in the first round going to move you from 6 to 4 or 6 to 3? I don't think so. Will they somehow be able to like package those two in another player or a couple of second round picks to go from like, let's say, I don't know, say the better of the two picks ends up being like 20, 24. Can those two picks combined get you up to number 20 or to number 18? Maybe, and that's maybe where the whole thing is actually more valuable to have those picks. But I don't think you need another first this year if it's at the very end of round 1. Now you're starting to get a lot of the prognosticators and the scouts saying, well, it's really not a very deep draft after all. Of course, the year that the Flyers have all this draft capital, now the prognosticators say it's not a deep draft. The prognosticators and the scouts are sometimes wrong. So you don't just give up on this draft. But I do think at some point you have to diversify the portfolio a little bit, and maybe you do look a little bit beyond 2025 when you're making deals. Okay. Let me go over to the comments here, and then I'm going to hit you up with some other thoughts here real quick. There's a lot of stuff here. Okay. Joe Papel says, believe it's a total salary dump. Farabee 5. Frost pending RFA at least 5. I don't know. Maybe he would have been 5. Maybe. Anthony DeGrazio says, 2025 makes no sense for free agency. 2026 is the free agency year. Drops a couple of names. Didn't Ant Sand say they had talks with Minnesota and Buffalo? I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with Ant for the last couple of days while I've been, dead to the world. Let's see. Nick Marcucci says, I prefer Rossi. Pettersson is soft. Ooh. I see that about Pettersson. I don't know if I believe it. I don't know. Anthony DeGrazia says, this organization should be doing everything in its power to move that Couturier and or Ellis contract. Perfect time to do it with cap going up. No, because you're going to have to eat that salary. I don't see any scenario where they can move Sean Couturier without having to eat a significant portion. And at that point, there's no reason to. There's genuinely not. You are better off hanging on to Sean Couturier and hoping for divine intervention and that his body bounces back at some point in the next year or two and that you do get another team to get interested in him down the line. There's no good solution for Sean Couturier. There's not. I mean, I want the guy to be healthy. I want the guy to get better because I think that actually does matter. And on a human level, I want the guy to be happy and healthy. There's no value add to being like, oh, well, we're going to eat $6 million of the deal, but at least we get the rest of it off the books. No, that's not worth it. I don't think it is. Let's see. JH says, screw it, go big or go home. Offer sheet McDry, Kucherov, McKinnon. No, they won't do that. Let's see. There were more things over here. Jamie Rollo says, if they could somehow find a team trying to reach the cap floor who might be willing to take on Couturier. That's an interesting angle. Not one that I've thought of. I just don't know what team that would be. That you're just trying to get to the bare minimum spending-wise. And you say, the leadership that the guy brings is 100% worth that. What is it, 8? Is it $8.75 million cap hit? It's a lot. It's a lot. Let's go. I see a lot of people arguing about Pettersson over here. That's okay. D.D. Skinner says, I hope Frost lights it up. Lit the lamp this weekend. Amadeo says, it was a salary dump, which gave you another second rounder in 2025. I mean, the deal ends up being a good one across the board. The only way that it doesn't work out, look, there's one scenario where the Flyers trade of Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee doesn't work. Those guys go on to be superstars. The likelihood of that, very low. I don't think you're going to see Farabee blossom into a 40-goal scorer. I think that if I were going to put money on which player ends up being more successful, it's probably Frost. But success is subjective. I don't know how successful is. But I think Frost is going to be a good player. I think they're both NHL players. They were never going to succeed here with Torts. They weren't. Torts So much of it just comes down to like, this organization loves torts. Ownership does. The front office does. They're living and dying by torts. If those guys go on to blossom under another coach, then maybe there are questions down the line. I don't see it going so sideways that you're like, wow, they really screwed the pooch there. There was no scenario where the team was going to pick Frost and Farabee over torts. So decide how you want that to go. JH says, players will decide the timeline. Sounds awfully like Alexi will decide if he'll go to Lehigh Valley. No, you decide. It's literally your job. I clarified this. So a few Wednesdays ago, and I clarified this last week, the week before, a couple of Wednesdays ago, I did a show. I had Briere's press conference up. I reacted. And there was a line in there about, like, he'll decide. So I did what anybody would do. I reacted to he'll decide. Then I had somebody reach out to me and say, well, I don't think that's exactly what was meant. It was more of like, he could choose to report or he could just like sit at home. Not that he gets to decide if he wants to stay in the NHL on his own. Like, he doesn't get to decide that. And I was like, okay, well, perhaps next time that should be a little bit more clear. A person who I talked to said, yeah, probably could have been a little bit more clear there. Yeah, probably. So Kolosov has now since come back up. Make of that what you will. The players will decide the timeline thing could also just be GM speak so that he doesn't lose the locker room and so that he doesn't lose the players. Because if he goes out there and explicitly says, we are not a playoff team, we suck, which you're not going to do, the players are going to feel pretty shitty. And then you might get some guys that start to kind of tune out, and it's not a great situation. All right, let's keep going. Joe Papel says, I'm glad Danny realized this was not a playoff team before the trade. Far from it. Just get in is BS. Only underperforming teams with talent can benefit from just getting in. I agree. That is where I go back and forth a lot about the hockey purgatory thing. If you're a very bad team who gets torts raising your floor and you just miss the playoffs, you just make it and you get blown out, versus like the Chuck Fletcher model, which is we're actually a better team. Band-Aid, Band-Aid, Band-Aid. And then you maybe just barely get in or get blown out in the first round. Like the ultimate result is the same. But this team is certainly not one that has been sold to the fans as being a very good team or one that's only a piece or two away. While I think that some of the messaging has been slightly unclear, I do think that they've been fair about that. They have not tried to tell you that this is a playoff caliber team. At no point have they said that. So make of that what you will. JB Rollo says, Charlie O'Connor said Risto was sore going into the Avs game, and it's related to that. Doesn't sound serious, but trade him now. Charlie, I'm sure, didn't say trade him now, but that's good to know. It's good context. I've been out of it, obviously, being ill. But Risto, to me, is a guy that you just have to decide. And here's where it gets tricky. Because most of the season, and even last year, I would have said, trade Risto. It just doesn't make sense. Why? Like you're years away. Here's the way that you don't trade Risto. There's only one. You don't trade Rasmus Ristolainen if you know you're about to drop offer sheets or go big game hunting this offseason and or next offseason. Because if you are going to try to go out and get that 1C, which, by the way, Briere said pregame to Jim Jackson. I always forget Jim's name. And Bush. He said that the flexibility that they got in this trade will allow them to go out after that top center. If they're really going to go big game hunting and they're going to go find that 1C this offseason or next offseason or through the trade market, through free agency and offer sheet, whatever it is, that maybe does change your timeline. Which, to go full circle to the beginning of the show, Mishkov coming over early might have changed their plan a little bit. Because you can't just ditz and dally and twiddle your thumbs for 2 or 3 years while Mishkov's on this ELC, just hoping that things are going to come together. If they're about to take a much more proactive step through free agency and or trades, you might keep Risto. Because in your mind, you might say, you know what, next year we might actually push for the playoffs. Because we're going to get a top 10 pick this year. As things are currently constructed, they would get the 7th pick. We're going to get that top 10 pick. We have 2 other first-round picks, 4 second-round picks this year. We have a good pipeline of young talent from last year's draft. Luchenko's there. They still think Bonk is something. There are other guys. There are plenty of goalies in the pipeline. If they feel like next year is the first year that they can actively say, we're gonna make a splash of some kind and let the chips fall where they may, the next year, if that's the case, maybe you don't trade Risto because you are going to have to find a replacement for him. But if they're not going to go game hunting this offseason or even next offseason, well, then, yeah, you trade him because it's clear that your timeline is still 2-3 years out. That's where I'm at. We'll see. Eric Wisniewski asks, trade Sealer? I don't know who wants him. Don't know. Can't imagine. If somebody does, depends on what the asset is. I'd say just for the salary dump of trading Sealer, I would. Yeah. I'm sure that there's somebody who can argue culture, hitting good old school blue liner, but I thought the Sealer deal last year was a mistake, especially with the Walker trade and then seeing Sealer kind of get exposed last year after Walker was gone and then Sealer got hurt. Sealer seems like a really good dude, so this isn't like to shit on Sealer, but like, again, what's your window? What makes the most sense? You should be able to develop or find a guy who can give you what Sealer does at a lower cap hit, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I'm not, but I could be. Jamie says, I'd take a first and cap relief for Risto in a heartbeat. What are you doing, Russ? Not to mention he's older and it lowers the floor. It really depends on what they think their timeline here is. Risto's ended up becoming a really good player. He's not a great player. He's certainly not a number one true, like 1D, but he's a good player. And sometimes you just need some good players. I know, that seems really crazy. Let's see. Nick also says, a great show, Russ. Thanks, Nick. We as fans just need some hope. How long do we have to wait? I think that right now you are in a much better position. If you are a fan of this team, I think you're in a much better position this morning than you were last Thursday morning because you have a clear vision in front of you. And Danny has now gone on to say, we cleared cap and that we want to get a 1C. We want to get that center. To me, it's impossible to walk away from this trade and to walk away from this weekend feeling anything but good about the future of the team. It's amazing how one move can change your mentality. I saw somebody say on Twitter, it was last night, or it was really early this morning. Somebody was like, told me that I was like flip-flopping because last week I said that the Flyers were kind of stuck in mediocrity and how they were, running it back again and yada, 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 and then they made a trade. Well, yeah, things change, right? Like, in fairness, the circumstances of things change. Where the Flyers were a week ago, I didn't have a ton of confidence because it didn't feel like they were going anywhere. In fairness, the Flyers prior to this trade felt very much kind of in that gray area. They've now dealt two of their best playmaking / goal-scoring options, and it's very clear that, the pick is probably the way to go this year. Now, again, for the 15th time, they can't tell players to go out and lose, but they can field a bad roster, and that bad roster isn't going to win a lot of games. Make of that what you will. Some people have a really hard time understanding that.
You can't tank. Tanking, players they don't want to lose on purpose. They don't do that.
Nobody tells them that they should. It's just fucking stupid. We just have there are a lot of thick-headed people in this market. Sports doesn't have to be that. The concept of analyzing a sport really doesn't have to be that hard. And if you just go back over the last 20, 25 teams that have won a Stanley Cup, they've probably had a number 1 or number 2 overall pick on their team. Some have maybe had more than one. Colorado, which is an example that some people like to try to use, Colorado picked 5 times in 7 years in the top 10, 3 times in the top 5. And guess what Colorado ended up doing? They didn't hit on all of those top 10 picks. They hit on enough of them. They didn't hit on every single top 5 pick, but they hit on enough of them. And they ultimately won a cup. Now, I'm not saying that the Flyers need to tear it all the way down. They never will. I'm not saying the Flyers need to go on a 3-year tank, because they're not going to. They're in year 2 of their own rebuild. You get a good pick this year. You figure out a way to get creative with those other 2 first round picks you have, and those 4 second-round picks. And guess what? All of a sudden, this team has a very bright future. And yes, that one trade of Frost and Farabee is enough to mentally change my outlook on the rest of the season, and is enough for me to continue to give grace into the offseason, because it's a very clear indication that you have the much bigger picture in mind. All right, let's see. Philly Sports Experts over on X says Ant will say this isn't a rebuilding move. I think he means Ant San Francisco. I mean, it is a rebuilding move. There's no other interpretation. But rebuilding in this case doesn't necessarily just mean tanking. It also could just mean rebuilding through free agency or through a trade, because now you actually do have, going into the offseason, you'll have considerably more cap space at your disposal. Let's see. Greg is also here. Apologizes for being late. Don't worry, Greg. The show's later than normal today, so you're okay. I think I'm really far behind here on comments, but I got to get to some other stuff here. I think that might have touched everything that I wanted to with the Flyers trade to this point. Anthony DeGrazio says this is the lowest they'll go tank-wise. It's only up from here. I agree with that. Okay. All right. I think we're good. Anybody else have a thing about the Flyers that they really want to desperately get? You can drop it in the comments. But I want to get to a couple of other things here, because I have to actually get going soon. That was a lot of Flyers today. Eagles landed in New Orleans. Believe that the media availability is today. Yes. There's going to be coverage too. Crossing Broad's going to have coverage. We, the collective company that owns Crossing Broad, sent down Pagan, video guy Craig. They're down there perusing the they're I don't know, they're maybe on a beignet bar crawl, but they're down there. They're going to have a lot of great content over on Crossing Broad covering the Eagles as they arrive in New Orleans and through Media Day. But it's a very interesting week. It's a really, really interesting week for the Eagles, because you're now 6 days out from arguably the biggest game, I would say, in the history of the franchise, because this is your chance at redemption, your shot at redemption against the Chiefs team that just barely beat you 2 years ago. You have the ability to stop an unprecedented third straight Super Bowl win by Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and these Chiefs. And you can do it with your franchise quarterback, the guy that you have really given all signals is your franchise guy in Jalen Hurts. You've gone out and overhauled parts of this roster, did a great job in the draft with Quinyon Mitchell, with Cooper DeJean. You found Zach Bond. The defensive line, if you look at the D-lines between 2 years ago and this year, vastly different. I mean, it's almost like an 8-year gap between most of the players, age-wise. So you're going into this, and you have the potential not only to stop the three-peat, but you have the potential to, declare yourselves as a mainstay, not just in the NFC, but the NFL as a whole. This team is young. This team has the ability to go out, win a Super Bowl, and open a window of their own. This isn't a team that's full of graybeards that are on their one last chance. Now, one of those graybeards happens to be Brandon Graham, who in theory could become eligible to play in the Super Bowl. His practice window has been opened up. We'll see if he ends up making the team, if he's there on the active game day roster on Sunday. I said last week that the story itself is great if Brandon Graham is able to play. But you don't want to upend the apple cart and mess with team chemistry on a team that's working so well to kind of force somebody back into the lineup. But Brandon Graham, given the history, Brandon Graham, given the experience, and the massive play in a Super Bowl that won you the Super Bowl, the strip sack, That's a guy that you want to have on Sunday if he is fully healthy and available. That's where I'm at. Like, I'm okay with the idea of Brandon Graham maybe being on the team on Sunday, but only if he's fully healthy. And if he's really hurt, not going to work. It's not going to work at all. If he's at like 50%, he can't be on the roster on Sunday. Like, it's that simple. If he cannot be close to 100%, he shouldn't be out there on Sunday. But if he's like 85, 90%, I like it. I like what he can bring. It's a leadership thing. It's the experience thing. And if, God forbid, there's an injury on that line, you have a guy who's not going to be intimidated by the moment. But he can't be 50%. That triceps has got to be about as damn near close to perfect as can be. Now, the Eagles themselves probably go into this game feeling better about it from a macro level. They have experience. A bunch of these guys have now played in the biggest game on the biggest stage, and they have played this team. So if you're the Eagles and you're going into Sunday, you have to feel significantly better because so many of the unknowns of what it is to play in a Super Bowl, about Media Row, about the player availability, about everything that surrounds the game, about being in town leading up to the Super Bowl. All of that is now second nature to a lot of these guys. That's a huge advantage. You know, to some extent, that's part of why Kansas City's been as good as they have been. Because they kept getting to AFC Championship games. They've been to multiple Super Bowls. At this point, it's second nature to them. For this Eagles team, I expect you're going to see a team that comes out a lot stronger on Sunday. You're going to see a team that looks like they've been there before because, surprise, surprise, they have been. Now, Wednesday and Friday shows are going to be really Eagles heavy. And we're going to break down everything that's said at Media Day because I'm sure there are going to be some great things. But I have to tell you, Jordan Mailata is giving me about as much confidence as any player on this team possibly could because Mailata had a really great quote, and I don't know if I'll find it here in time, but Mailata had a thing about this Super Bowl team. I found it. About this Super Bowl team versus the last one. And no, I just lost it. I thought I had it, but I didn't. He said that this team is closer and stronger than the team that went to the Super Bowl and lost 2 years ago. This is a guy who's like very highly respected as a team leader, and he believes that this team is better and closer than the team that lost in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. That to me is a huge thing. So again, from the outside looking in, I say experience, less unknowns. You should be in really good shape. When I hear somebody from within that locker room explicitly say, we are in good shape, this team is better, you should feel a lot better as an Eagles fan. Now again, we will get into the Eagles a lot more later this week. So if you were here for Eagles talk, the bad news is that's about it for today. The good news is Wednesday and Friday, we'll be diving fully or almost entirely into the Eagles and their Super Bowl hunt. Now, the last thing I want to get to is what happened in the NBA over the weekend, because I'm still not in shock, but I'm still surprised, I guess, by the return or lack thereof that Dallas got for Luka Doncic. I cannot fathom in the least bit what they were thinking. Now, I did see a very convincing thread over on Twitter about why Dallas might have intentionally tried to tank their team because maybe they're trying to force the issue on a casino in Texas and get casino gaming passed. And so they're in theory going to try to force the issue and force the city of Dallas and Texas as a whole to pass a gambling bill. And if they don't, they're going to threaten to relocate the team to Las Vegas. And that if they had Luka Doncic, or if they'd gone out and made a trade that had significant future draft capital, that would give hope and that would make it seem less likely that they would try to move the team from Dallas to Vegas. I saw a very interesting thread on it this morning. I don't know if I believe it. But what's wild to me is that in a league full of insiders and in a league full of whispers and rumors, no one had this. No one had any indication that Luka Doncic was potentially going to be dealt from Dallas, and certainly not to the Lakers. And when I saw the trade, all I kept thinking was, wait a second, they traded Luka Doncic to the Lakers, which sucks, for Anthony Davis, who can't stay healthy. Anthony Davis, who just got done bitching about how the Lakers needed a center because he likes to play the four. This was a thing that was a problem with him in New Orleans. That, like, they might have actually been better with him as a center. But he's like, no, I want to play the four. Okay. So he gets done complaining about it, and like 2 weeks later, he's traded. So Dallas has gotten older. Now, in theory, it's a good fit with Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis. And like, hell, they might actually compete for the championship this year. They might. The Mavericks making the NBA Finals wouldn't be a shock. But long-term, horrible. 25-year-old international phenom, one of the most popular players in the entire sport, not just the NBA, but globally. And you traded him for Anthony Davis. You got back nothing of significant value in the future. And all I kept thinking was, yo, Mikal Bridges got 5 first-round picks, excuse me, in return. 5 first-round picks were dealt to get Mikal Bridges. And the Mavericks did what? They got Anthony Davis, who's 6 years older than Luka Doncic and has significant injury concerns? What? What made it even funnier and even worse is that, a day later, 2 days later, Sacramento trades De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio, and there are multiple first-round picks dealt in that trade. So, in fairness, De'Aaron Fox, very good point guard. Most teams would be lucky to have De'Aaron Fox, but he's not Luka Doncic. You mean to tell me that De'Aaron Fox can get you 3 firsts? Mikal Bridges in a very dumb trade got 5 firsts. Luka Doncic gets Anthony Davis. Are you out of your mind? And the worst part is that Dallas's GM tried to rationalize it and also said they didn't talk to any other team. They only talked to the Lakers. That seems weird. They only talked to the Lakers. Lakers had to think about it. They had to consider, mull it over. Oh yeah, LeBron's like 75. Do we really want LeBron long term? Does he have another 10 years now? Well, we need a 25-year-old superstar phenom. Oh yeah, that sounds okay. That sounds good. Yeah, well, I guess we'll do that. Are you kidding me? So now, one of the best young players in the league has once again landed with the Lakers, and now they have the cornerstone of their team for the next decade plus. This league makes no sense. None. That's it. I'm out. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. I'll be back on Wednesday and Friday again, where we will dive into the Eagles. As I mentioned before, if you're a fan of Crossing Broad, I would pay attention to the site and to social media this week because Pagan, Video Guy Craig, they're down there in New Orleans. They're going to be doing Media Day. So make sure you pay attention. Go check out those channels. You can go subscribe over there. In the meantime, this has been the Russ Joy Show. I've been Russ Joy. My voice is giving out, but you knew that already because you're smart. I'll talk to all of you Wednesday here on the Russ Joy Show. Have a great day, everybody. Talk soon.